I'm CKnappenberger, and this is Module 8, Legal Aspects of Teacher Evaluations for EDL 851 in the fall of 2018. The first article, Every Student Succeeds Acts, talks about kind of what happened with the federal government limiting its involvement in its say on teacher evaluations. One of the big things about the article is talking about now requires that states are allowed to set their own goals, and they kind of get to decide what evaluation systems they would like to use, and the federal government's involvement is more limited. They can design it. It needs to have multiple measures in the evaluation, meaning it should be based off of teacher evaluations in the classroom. It could also be off of student growth, and that they should limit what student test scores have to, the percentage that it plays into the teacher evaluations. Some of the things they did talk about in it is being aware that every state is different and that its collective bargaining laws are different, and the evaluation system has to fall within that. Many of the same rules apply that were before, student test scores, the multiple things. They also said that any new evaluation system that was going to be used needed to be adequately funded so that it could be implemented properly, and also that training needed to be required so that all of the teachers and evaluators using the system would know how to properly use the new evaluation system. The next article talking about how teacher evaluation heads to courts, looking at how the new regulations for evaluations have brought many lawsuits. They were trying to make it best for students and for teachers alike, and in that process there became a lot of legal litigation that went along with it. Some of the court cases I highlighted were some looking at tenure, Leff et al. Versus Clark County School Districts in Nevada. This was saying that contractual rights for their employment, they couldn't be terminated without a hearing. The new case, essentially, that if they had been tenured before this new law went into effect, that it should not affect or they could not be terminated without a proper hearing in the court system. The teachers did win this court case. The next one was in Louisiana, and it was the Louisiana Federation of Teachers versus the state of Louisiana. And this was saying that teacher evaluations and pay scales, the evaluations couldn't be linked to both. They needed to pick one or the other. The constitutional provisions didn't allow for their tenure to be linked to both their pay scale. Evaluations couldn't be linked to both their pay scale and their tenure. The three that I looked at for evaluations, the one in New Mexico. In New Mexico, it looked at the idea that the education department imposed this new evaluation system without kind of giving the districts control over it. So the teachers fought to say that the districts needed to decide what was needed. In New York, Ahern versus King, this looked at the idea that their student growth formula penalized teachers based off of the poverty of their students, and that was kind of not allowed, and that teachers were being negatively affected in evaluations because of their student growth and the fact that they were dealing with populations that were below the poverty line. And then finally, in Tennessee, Trout versus the Knox County Board of Education looked at the idea that although teachers were supposed to be evaluated on all of their students' performance on tests, when the evaluation system was looked at, or the numbers and the math configuration was looked at, it seemed that teachers were being judged off of just a small number of student scores, and therefore they were often falling below proficient levels. Next article, looking at teacher evaluations, kind of an overview of the whole issue. And in the article, it began talking about the idea that how did this become such a central issue in education evaluations? And a lot of it had to do with the race to the top that was put into effect, that looked at the idea of linking funding for state schools with a new evaluation system that linked teacher evaluations to student test scores. And so that kind of became an issue. Also with donations from private foundations that put into how if the money was going to be given to a district, it needed to be, the evaluation system used by the district needed to link teacher evaluations to student test scores, such as from the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. So kind of looking at how new teacher evaluations work based off of the article and looking at the multiple components, how the new evaluation systems, when they need to be linked to test scores, there needs to be multiple components in the actual evaluations themselves. So student growth, student test scores, as well as classroom observations would be all part of the new evaluation systems. Teacher union responses to these evaluation systems. Although teacher unions wanted to support new evaluation systems that kept teachers, up on their craft and made proficient teachers available to students, they were very anti-linking teacher pay and tenure to these evaluations. If a teacher was tenured, the evaluations, they were struggling with the fact that it would affect their tenure. Also, the idea of pay, holding back on a teacher's pay or giving them incentives in pay to have better test scores. Teacher unions were very kind of adamantly opposed to this, hence the article that was mentioned previously talking about all the legal litigation that came from a lot of these new evaluation systems. And lastly, the article looked at, is the new strategy working? And although it said that there were sometimes increase in teacher productivity when they were linked to test scores and things, that there really is no definitive answer, and that sometimes when it was implemented it worked and other times it didn't. And also the negative reaction and all the time and money that was spent in the legal litigation process because of the new strategies. So again, the article kind of left it as there is no definitive answer, yes or no, if it was working. Looking at the New Milford Public School District and our teacher evaluation process, we adhere to the Achieve NJ evaluation. And looking at Achieve NJ, we obviously have teacher observations, which is the pre-conference observation, documentation, post-conference, and then submission of the final observation report. So that teacher observation is actually 55% of our total evaluation for the year in the state of New Jersey. So the New Milford district where I work adheres to that. Also in the other kind of percentage, 45% that comes from student growth objective, that's 15% of our evaluation for the year. And that is teacher designed, it's teacher scored, it's teacher documented, and you're kind of looking for an area in which you think your students will show the most growth. And you come up with 2 objectives from that. They're, like I said, completely teacher designed and teacher driven. So it's a teacher's rubric that's being used, it's the teacher who scores it all, it's the teacher who comes up with the language of the objective, and then the teacher who submits kind of the final documentation based off of their scoring of the rubric or assessment, however they choose to do that. That's 15%. And then 30% of our test scores are for teachers who are in tested subject areas. So that would be math and English for grades 3 to 12. The other teachers who are outside of tested subject areas, their then percentage for student growth objectives would be larger. Observation reports and student growth objectives would be larger, but any math or language arts teacher from grades 3 to 12 in the state of New Jersey would have 30% of their evaluation based on student test scores. In order to receive tenure charges under Achieve NJ, which is kind of what I've included here, it's 2 years of ineffective evaluation scores. And like I said, that would go to the percentage for the Achieve NJ that I mentioned previously. In 2 years, if you're ineffective both years, superintendent must file tenure charges or charges of inefficiency, you could say. In your first year, if you're partially effective and then ineffective the second year, again, they file tenure charges against you. If you show growth from one year to the next or improvement from one year to the next, it's usually then up to the superintendent's discretion. But then again, if you dip down below or you go, kind of in a downward slope, then the superintendent would have to file tenure charges against you in the state of New Jersey. In my district, there's a couple of recourses that you have for if you feel as though your evaluation isn't what you would like it to be or it's inaccurate. And the first thing they're going to ask you to do is to go to your immediate supervisor, whoever it is that observed you, the principal or vice principal. Talk to them about it, bring documentation with you, also upload documentation into the evaluation system in order to kind of support your opinion or to support your idea about why you think is inaccurate. You can make an addendum to the observation report that can be put in, like I said, documents that can be uploaded, or comments on the thing itself. And that's the first place to go. That has seen lots of success in our district, especially with immediate supervisors. If you feel as though that is not okay, or that it hasn't been justified or fixed the way that you would like it to be, you can go to the director of curriculum and speak to the director of curriculum about it, have them look at your observation. You can also ask to be re-observed by someone else. This has only happened a couple of times in district. We try to avoid that because oftentimes they go in with a prejudice, or they're worried that they would go in with a prejudice. After that, you can go to the superintendent, after the director of curriculum, if you haven't been satisfied with the answer. At any point, you're asked to bring union representation with you for any of these things, just to have someone else there to listen, or to kind of be there as your eyes and ears, tell you maybe what you should say, maybe what you shouldn't say. As a teacher. Oftentimes, if you're meeting with your immediate supervisor, a union representation might not be needed, but after that, if you're going anywhere, it's often asked that you do bring union representation so they can support you if anything kind of does come from that. If you feel as though you're going to be let go, often the union should be notified before that. Again, if you're going past your immediate supervisor to talk about an ineffective evaluation, and that kind of would be something the union would know about. They can provide you with legal counsel if that's what you choose to do. Oftentimes, we are hoping that it doesn't get to that, and in recent years, it hasn't. But one court case that we did have would be the New Milford Board of Education versus Lawrence Henchy. Lawrence was a teacher in the district. He was actually my teaching partner in the district. And after 2 years of ineffective readings and a salary increase being withheld from him, he was brought up on tenure charges. The NMEA supported him, and he was assigned an NJEA attorney, and they went to the case. There were 6 charges brought up against him about ineffective teaching, not meeting his teaching requirements, a couple of things. Again, the entire case is published, so I'm not giving away any kind of information. And what actually ended up happening was that he was released on one of the charges, which ended up not having anything to do with his ineffective teaching. It had to do with, it turned into a different case about malice against a student and a parent. So that was actually the charge that he was released on. But again, the NMEA, the New Milford Education Association, supported him and tried to help him out and give him counsel, and also provide him a mentor teacher to kind of help him along. And then the NJEA supplied him with an attorney to kind of go through the entire process. In the end, he did end up losing his case, and he was released from the district, from his tenure. His teaching license was not revoked or anything like that, but he was, again, his tenure was revoked in the district.